Welcome to the Fantasy Baseball Beat, part of the Triple Play Fantasy Network. I am your host, Chris Torres, joined as always, or just once in a while, by Carlos Mercano and Mike Carter. Yes, you get all three of us today. We are also going to be joined by Nick Piecoro of the Arizona Republic and azcentral.com. We're going to be talking all things Diamondbacks, a young and exciting team with lots of fantasy relevant players to discuss. But before we get started, let me introduce my co hosts. Directly underneath me on the screen, not in real life, that would be awkward, is Mike Carter. You're looking beautiful and beardless, fresh off of your trip to First Pitch, Arizona. How are you, my friend?
I'm great, Chris. How are you doing? I wish I was in Arizona. It's currently snowing outside of Chicago here, so not so great.
All
You
right.
got
Yeah, same
spoiled.
here. We had our first snow of the season here in New York. So, what about you, Carlos? You are in Costa Rica. Any snow down there?
Oh man, this is like one of the times I'm really happy to be here. When I hear everyone talking about snow and that stuff, we have other things, but snow is not one of them. All good, all good. I'm so happy to be once again, you know, trying to get the best information for our listeners.
Absolutely. Well, listen, Carlos, we may need at some point this winter. Me and Mike may need to make a trip down there. Get out of the cold, get out of the snow. We know that we can stay with you, right? And then we could even record a live podcast. How
Oh,
awesome would that
Ooh,
be?
from the beach, huh?
All right, I like it.
sounds like a
Pina,
Uh,
plan, guys.
pina coladas and the waterman
all right,
and,
let's
and
set it up.
baseball.
So our guest isn't here yet. So while we wait for him, tell me, guys, what do you hope to get out of this interview?
So I'm really, interested because there's a bunch of prospects and newer guys in the Arizona team that are really interesting, and we will talk about them. So I'd really love to get Nick's perspective on them. So I'm pretty much looking forward to it.
All right. Yeah, absolutely. This is a fun team to talk about. Mike, is there anybody in particular that you're interested to know about or any I guess bigger takeaways that you're looking for from this interview?
Yeah, I'm really interested to see what Nick has to say about the outfield situation here in
Yeah.
Arizona. I live in Kane County, which was a single A affiliate of the Diamondbacks for many years, and saw some of these guys as they were coming through. They all of a sudden have a very, very busy pipeline to the major leagues through their outfield. So I'm interested to hear what he has to say about how that sorts out. There's certainly some names there that might be able to help fantasy players in 2023.
Yeah, I think that for a lot of people who are tuning in, that's also going to be at the top of their mind. There's a lot of questions. You've got Dalton Varsho, McCarthy, who was a fantasy darling last year, Corbin Carroll, Pavin Smith. There's a lot going on there. So I'm sure our listeners are going to want some help with sorting all of that out. And here to help us do that, we've got Nick Piecoro of, again, azcentral.com and the Arizona Republic. Nick, thank you so much for taking the time. How are you?
Hey, doing well. Thanks for having me.
All right. Well, listen, we were just talking about how excited we are to learn more about this Diamondbacks team and to get your perspective. But we always like to start out by learning a little bit more about our guest. And specifically, I'd like to ask you, how did you get your start in the industry and what has your career path looked like?
I guess it's been pretty flatlined for a while. I've just been doing the same job for this is probably my 15th or 16th season covering the Diamondbacks.
Wow.
I got started. I don't know. I mean, I guess I probably got started in journalism when I realized I wasn't going to be any good at baseball, like good enough to play. You keep playing baseball, and my friends started getting bigger and stronger, and I was like, yeah, this isn't going to happen for me. And so I think I wanted to kind of be a baseball writer ever since I was in like high school and college, and worked at the college paper and did internships and things like that. And yeah, I wound up leaving Arizona briefly, came back, and and wound up like covering high schools and stuff for the Republic for a little while, and then got moved to be a backup Diamondbacks writer, and then got moved onto the beat, and I've been doing it ever since, and enjoying it ever since.
Yeah, that is, I hear what you're saying. Like, if you felt like you couldn't necessarily cut it playing baseball professionally, it was a way to be around the game and engage with the game. And it sounds like this has been a goal of yours for a while. Um, have you just worked for the Diamondbacks, or has it? Have you worked the beat for any other teams?
No, that's the only team I've covered in the majors. Yeah, I've done Diamondbacks coverage at the Republic since the '07 season. Yeah, that's about all.
You're a franchise man.
Exactly. Institutional knowledge, right?
Well, that is part of the reason we wanted to have you on. We know that you are plugged into everything that's going on with the Diamondbacks. So I'm going to pass this to Mike for our next question.
Nick, huge fan of your work. I want a full disclosure here. I live in Kane County, which was where the Diamondbacks had their A affiliate for many years, and so have followed your work and am a huge fan of what you've done over the course of time. So thanks so much for being with us. First question I have is kind of a lead-off question that we like to ask all of our guests, which is, what was your overall assessment of the D-backs in 2022? Where do you think things kind of went right for this team, and where they kind of went wrong?
Yeah, well, first of all, thanks for the kind words. And then, yeah, as far as the team goes, it seemed like a step in the right direction in a lot of ways for these guys. I mean, they're kind of bound to improve, right? I mean, it's hard to get a whole lot worse than they were in 21 when they won 52 games or whatever it was. But I think it's easy to, when you're caught up in one of those years, it's easy to kind of, I don't know, just to forget that, like, kind of everything that could have gone wrong did go wrong, and that they're not this bad. Their pitching stayed a lot more healthy in 2022. And, probably more importantly to the kind of overall direction of things, they just had a lot of young players that kind of stepped up and started to emerge and establish themselves. And so, whether it was, a full productive year out of Dalton Varsho, seeing what Jake McCarthy can do, seeing what some of those young arms that came up late in the season, Corbin Carroll coming up late in the season, Alec Thomas showing what he can do defensively despite some struggles at the plate the last couple months. There's just a lot to like. There was a lot of reason to think that things are just coming together a little bit more. It's not as much of a, like, kind of looking down at the farm system rankings and looking at the lists and kind of squinting and seeing, like, it was coming together. And I think that if they had a more competitive bullpen, the second half of the season would have been even more successful. I think they probably cost themselves, I don't know. I mean, it's always hard to say, a half dozen games or so that could have gone the other way if they had just had a little bit more consistency down there in the bullpen.
Are you telling me Mark Melanson was not the answer at closer?
Come on, stop it, Torres. Stop it, man.
I can't help myself. I really can't.
Well, Torres and I have a side bet that Melanson will have 20 saves for somebody this year. We just don't know who it will be.
It's weird. I mean, I think Brent Strom was saying that they were looking at some, like, I don't know that he ever told us exactly what metric they were looking at, but some sort of an all-in, like, pitch movement, batted ball data type of number. And in a lot of ways, this year was not that different from the year last year when he, I think, led the majors in saves with the Padres, or was up there among the league leaders. I forget. So, and look, I watch it, like, there was some truth to that, I felt like, because it seemed like every ball that was hit was finding holes. It was just, he was constantly in, lead off base hit, like constantly with guys on base and struggling to get guys out. He's obviously not a good bat misser and was a really bad matchup for those extra inning situations with the runner on second base when you really need to be missing bats. So I think he got thrown into some of those situations when he probably shouldn't have. I think they probably should have gone in a different direction faster and recognize that he's just not going to be able to kind of navigate through those innings as easily. But yeah, I mean, look, we'll see if he can bounce back. I don't think that they're really betting on it. I think they know that they need to add some guys. They added someone recently, in Carlos Vargas. I think they want to add another couple of late inning options on top of that. So we'll see if they can get it done. They don't have a whole lot of money to spend, but they do seem to have some talent and excess that they could trade.
So we're going to go back into that messy bullpen situation in a few minutes. But you mentioned Dalton Varsho a few moments ago, and this year Varsho and Walker were pretty much the defensive core of the team, right? Between the two of them, they had a BWAR of 4.5, the first time since 2016 that in the D-backs had two guys with at least 4.5 when Woldy and Segura did it. So this is definitely the core around in which the management is going to build the offensive in 2023, right?
Yeah, I think so. I think that they recognize they're probably not going to be winning games the way the Phillies win games. I think they know that they're going to have to catch the ball, which they did a really poor job of that the year before. You want to talk about like some reasons why they were bad and reasons why they were better. I mean, there were games where they were starting Pavin Smith in center field. They were moving Josh Rojas all around the diamond. There were just guys being put in, and Cattell was still playing center field. Guys were just being put in situations where kind of physically they weren't either able to handle it or kind of weren't fully prepared and ready to play that position at a major league level. So, yeah, I think that they're going to expect to have as it currently stands. I mean, they're going to have three center fielders running around out there at all times.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so moving to the mound here and looking at a few of the arms who really performed well for them last year, talking specifically about Merrill Kelly and Zach Gallen. I mean, listen, they combined for almost 400 innings of really solid production. Merrill Kelly, I mean, there wasn't, I don't think, a lot of expectations for him going into the year. Finished with a 3.37 ERA. Gallen took a step forward. What is the outlook on those two pitchers moving forward?
Yeah, I mean, I think we saw that run that Gallen got on in the second half. We've seen it from him before. I don't want to make it seem like this was something new, right? I mean, he came up in 2019 and was really good. He was terrific for all but I think like 2 innings of the 2020 season. He had like a couple of innings that went sideways on him, and otherwise he may have won the Cy Young or been right up there with Bauer and Darvish and those guys that year. He went through some injury issues in 21, but was healthy last year and was awesome. I think that's the expectation, is that this is a guy that's going to front a rotation and be a Cy Young type guy, a Cy Young candidate type of guy. Merrill was really good too. Kind of a little bit overshadowed, right? But got to 200 innings. I think his stuff ticked up a little bit. I think he was throwing a little bit harder. I think he had a little bit more movement on his two-seamer. I think his changeup was a pitch that had he talks about how it was a really big pitch for him when he was in Korea. And he never really had it consistently in the big leagues prior to this year. It was a good pitch for him. His curveball is a good pitch for him. I mean, he's got the ability to command the ball, to command all of his pitches, really. And keep guys off balance, and we saw it. I mean, he was consistently working deep into games, and was it just felt like every time he took the ball, there was a pretty good chance they were going to be winning that night. So I think those are two guys they're definitely going to be building around, and I think it makes it easier when you have guys like that to kind of start thinking about integrating young guys into a rotation. Whether it's 2 at a time or just one rookie at a time, I don't know. We'll end up seeing. But I think knowing that there's some stability at the front lets you kind of start to do those sorts of things a little bit more easily, instead of putting the younger guys into those sorts of spots where they're maybe not quite ready for.
I think that one question that I'm having is that they threw a lot this last season, right? They almost combined for 400 innings pitched. So volume wise, do you think there's going to be any limitation for them next year because of the amount of innings they pitched this year?
I wouldn't think so from Merrill's perspective. I mean, he's what 33, 34 years old. I think he's kind of ready to just keep taking the ball every 5 days and being that workhorse. Gallen, I think, given the injury history,
Yeah.
they're always going to err a little bit on the side of caution, and maybe not like, skipping anybody in the rotation when there's an off day. Always making sure he gets, instead of just 4 days, 5 days as often as possible. But I think he would tell you that he would want to pitch even more. So I don't think so, but I guess we'll just have to see how it plays out.
Mm-hmm. Nick, what impact do you think Brent Strom has had on this pitching staff? And I was also wondering if you could speak a little bit more to, you brought up this metric that he's talked about. So I'm wondering if you could give us a little bit more insight into what exactly. Come on, give us the secret sauce.
I wish I could. I remember asking him
it.
about it as a follow-up, and he didn't really give me a whole lot. Like I said, I think it had something to do with like how well the pitches were moving, how well they were being located, how hard they were being hit by opposing teams, and just sort of, I don't know if every pitch has its own expected, OPS, or if you can extrapolate some sort of an expected ERA out of it. But whatever it was, he only referenced it really that one time. And I tried following up with him on it afterward, and he didn't give me an awful lot. But yeah, I don't know. It's always hard to say what kind of an impact a pitching coach makes. I know that he's constantly working his butt off and has all kinds of ideas to try to get these guys better. I think. Look, I mean, Gallen is really good, and I think he was before Strom got here. I don't know. Did he help with Merrill? Did he help with some of these young guys that came up? I know he was working very closely with Tommy Henry on getting a little better feel for his breaking ball later in the season. You would always hear things throughout the course of the season that he was working on with guys and all the different ideas that he had. I guess he wasn't good enough to turn around Madison Bumgarner, but with the stuff that Bumgarner was featuring for most of the year, I'm not sure that there was a whole lot that could be done there.
Is Bumgarner the type of guy? I mean, is he one who would take, I guess, suggestions or a different way of doing things, and just from your experience?
Yeah, I think so. I think that he's open to things, but I don't know that he's gonna stick with things for a long time if they don't work. I think that he's a guy that has had a lot of success doing things a certain way and kind of wants to default back to that. I don't know. I mean, it was interesting. We would always hear about Strom talking about Bumgarner trying to work on this, and we're working on that, before his next start. We're trying to get him to do this, and then he'd go out there and look exactly the same, and Bumgarner would say that he didn't really make any adjustments. So I don't know. Maybe he wasn't really too keen on some of the things that Strom was throwing out there, and I know he hasn't been too keen on some of the like game planning stuff. Bumgarner's big on trying to read swings and trying to think along with hitters, which a lot of guys do. And again, like, it's something that worked really well for him for a long time. So
sure did.
I don't know what the answer is there.
Yeah. Well, listen, you guys, I tried. I wanted whenever whenever us fantasy baseball nerds hear about like a new metric, like our ears perk up. We're just like, oh my gosh, what is it? So, if you ever get any info, you could pass that along to
I know
us.
where to find you.
All right. Yeah.
Nick, a question I had for you that I think a lot of fantasy players are wanting to know about, and I mean just baseball fans in general. The Diamondbacks have a ton of outfield prospects at this time, and I know that they just DFA'd Stone Garrett this last couple of days. Jake McCarthy and Josh Rojas were guys that were really helpful to fantasy players down the stretch last year, but there's a crowded pipeline here. How do you see this thing shaking out with Carroll and Hummel and Alec Thomas, Varsho? Is there a realistic playing time path for any of these guys?
Yeah, I mean, I think you can pencil in Corbin Carroll is getting a lot of at bats. I think you can pencil in Varsho is getting a lot of at bats. And look, I mean, based on the way that McCarthy played, I don't know how you don't, expect him to play a lot as well. I think that they're probably going to add a right-handed hitting outfielder. I mean, they got rid of two of them the other day with Luplow and Stone Garrett both getting DFA'd, and they just want a little bit more balance out there. Maybe that comes in the form of trading one of these outfielders. Maybe they flip Alec Thomas or McCarthy or whoever, Varsho, and get back a similarly controllable right-handed hitter that kind of just does some things that these other guys, don't do. I mean, look, this was a team that was a little susceptible against left-handed pitching. They need to get some of that. They need to get some balance, or they need Carson Kelly to be more consistent, Ketel Marte to be more consistent, Christian Walker, keep doing what he did. Emmanuel Rivera was an interesting player there in the second half. But yeah, I don't know how that's going to shake out for a lot of these guys. I mean, there's other guys in the system. Even Dominic Fletcher just got added to the 40. Dominic Canzone got left off. Jorge Barosa got added. Like, I don't know how these guys have a real path to big league opportunity at the moment. It's not just that they're blocked by. It's not just that there are guys that are starters ahead of them. It's guys that have like 5-6 years of control ahead of them. So I don't know where it goes, but I mean, look, we've all seen situations change really fast in baseball. If it's an injury or somebody doesn't play well, somebody else pops up and dominates, and suddenly the picture looks totally different by the middle of June. So I don't know how it's going to play out exactly, but yeah, it does look tough for some of these guys.
Definitely. And you mentioned Marte, and he's just recently from getting his long-term contract, but things weren't that well for him this year. So might there be something we should be worried about, because he's usually a fantasy darling, and Kittel was really helpful in a lot of cats, but he was underwhelming this year. Might there be still some injuries lingering, or what's the feeling from the team? Are they worried about him, or let's just chalk it up to a bad year and that's it?
I don't know. Probably a little of both. He never really did get going this year. It wasn't a bad year. I mean, he made a lot of contact. He played a lot of games, which for him over the last several years has been an issue, staying on the field. He had a couple of small little hamstring things, but was able to get back in there and DH and stay in the lineup. But he didn't hit lefties with the same kind of authority that he has in the past. His swing from the left side was just okay. It almost looked like at times he was just kind of trying to like he's hunting singles at times and not looking to kind of be that masher that we saw particularly late in the 2019 season. I think he lost a little bit of athleticism. I'm not sure why, and I'm not sure if it can be rediscovered or not. I'm sure that they're hoping that different workouts and exercises and things, and maybe a little bit more focus on that, on explosiveness and instead of bulk strength, maybe gets that back. If I'm them, I'm a little bit more concerned about what I saw defensively from him, especially with the shift going away, and what that's going to mean going forward to your ability to kind of keep him comfortably in the lineup in games. It seems like it's backed up fast. I mean, it was just a few years ago that he was a pretty decent option at shortstop. I don't know. I felt like there were stretches this year. There were little pockets where he kind of looked like his old self, but it just didn't last. And I know you started off the question asking about injuries. I don't know. That is a thing that I wonder about. I feel like he's he's always kind of been a ride the wave type of guy. And sometimes if he's not feeling great, you can see it in his body language, so it's an interesting one. It's funny. It feels like when people talk about the Diamondbacks and the future, we sort of forget that this was a guy that was like high up on MVP ballots
Yeah.
in
Mm-hmm.
2019, and still has that in there, I guess. But it's also interesting that like you can kind of imagine this path to them being a competitive team again, where Ketel's hitting like 6th or 7th, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know how it's going to play out. I guess that if they had that guy from before, it would be a whole lot easier to kind of see them as that contending team. But also, if Corbin Carroll becomes what they think he is, if Varsho can get a little bit more consistent, if McCarthy can be the guy that he was for that 6-week stretch there in the second half, and so on, then they could be just fine. And I guess the contract, it's even if it's just kind of the sort of season you had this year, is it really, it's not that bad of a contract.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah, Nick, as there definitely is a path to this team being competitive, right? They've got some pieces there, but you spoke earlier about the bullpen, and that really is an area where the team needs to improve if they are going to be competitive. So what are your thoughts on that as far as any potential moves? I know they made a move the other day for Carlos Vargas, but do you see any other signings or any additions that will be made to this bullpen? And do you think the closer of this team is on the roster now?
I don't know that one. That's a really good one. I think that from talking to Hazen last week at the GM meetings, it sounded like he wasn't expecting to be a big player in the free agent relief market. He made it kind of sound like, I think the way he put it to me is, we're going to have to take some chances on guys if we're going to get that power that we need in the bullpen. Mm-hmm. And I think one of the examples he threw out there was maybe taking some chances on guys that are health risks. I don't know. I kind of glanced at the free agent list and threw out, Trevor May or Trevor Rosenthal, or I think I mentioned Ken Giles, guys that are coming off injury, like, have done it in the somewhat recent past. Maybe could catch lightning in a bottle and be it again. But I think that more than likely they're going to have to find somebody else in a trade to add to that group that they have now. I mean, Justin Martinez is on the roster. I don't know if you guys are familiar with him, but he was an impressive. He put on an impressive show in the fall league. Guy coming back from Tommy John, who threw 30 some innings maybe this year in the minor leagues. I might be off on that, but he has a upper 90s heater, a slider, and then he's got this like split change that he developed over the last couple of years that's turned into a really nasty pitch. And suddenly is a guy that was added to the 40-man roster despite very limited career experience because of the injury and the pandemic. That all of a sudden looks like a guy who's going to be in their bullpen at some point next year and maybe help them get that power that they need. Vargas is another guy. I don't know if you would consider Kevin Ginkel, or, I'm sure there's others I'm forgetting. I mean, Mantiply had a nice season. Kyle Nelson had a nice season. And there's others internally. But I would expect that they're probably going to be trading for another bullpen piece, at least one more before this is all said and done.
Do you think it's going to be more in line with like the Melanson signing last year, like maybe a veteran guy to come in, or do you see them going a different direction?
Yeah, well, I don't know. I mean, if they could trade for, I mean, you saw the reliever the Mariners traded for Hernandez. Maybe they get a guy that's had some experience, or maybe is a little bit later in terms of control, and they can give up a prospect to get a couple of years of control of a guy. I would think that they would want to have somebody that has done it before, rather than having, Vargas and Martinez are really interesting arms, but there's questions, of course. I would think that they would want to get someone. I don't think that they're going to go down that road of like the kind of what they've done more recently of the. I mean, the Mike Hazen years of closers, I think goes. Let's see, Fernando Rodney, Brad Boxberger, Greg Holland, Joaquim Soria, Archie Bradley 1 year before that, Soria, and then Melanson this year. I think that's everybody. So I mean, it's a lot of older kind of retread guys that, you know.
There's a pattern there.
That's a type.
Yeah, I think Rodney gave them some power that they didn't have. Also gave them heartburn, I'm sure. And then like Soria was okay for a bit. Holland had a couple months, maybe 2.5 month stretch where he was pretty good. Boxberger wasn't bad for a while. So I mean, they've been able to get like pockets of effectiveness out of these guys, but you know, I'm just guessing that they're gonna probably try to err on the side of a little bit more prime aged guys.
I'll trade you Kendall Graveman for Alec Thomas straight up.
Guys.
No,
Graveman's an interesting name.
I wish I could have that power to do that because I love Alec Thomas. He's a local guy and he's a really, really good person. Nick, kind of switching gears a little bit, you know, you kind of started to talk a little bit about Hazen and talking with him last week and his vision and strategy for building the team. Anything that you could kind of shed light on with that for us and you know, maybe talk a little bit about the current chemistry of the team and if it seems like it's gelling in a good direction?
Yeah, I mean, I think that they feel pretty good about the way things are going. I think that he's trying to make sure that they sort of stay disciplined and I guess like keep expectations at like a reasonable place, right? I think he's, you know, he said something to me about like, look, you know we're not going to be on paper going into next year as division favorites, right? I mean, we need to kind of act accordingly. Like we want to get better. We want to add players to this roster. We want to have a team that can get into, you know, July and August and be adding ahead of the deadline. But like we're not going to be trading guys that we see as having, you know, 6 years of impact on this roster for, you know, a 1 year rental, 2 year rental. I think they're encouraged by the way everything has gone. I think they're encouraged by the way that those pitchers came up and through late in the season. I think that they feel like they have a decent amount of starting pitching depth at the upper levels, including guys that were all throwing, you know, whether it was Nelson and Jameson and Tommy Henry, Brandon Fott, Slade Ciccone, you know, people like that are, you know, I think all those guys I mentioned were college starters. Well, college pitchers, maybe they weren't starters, but anyway, they've all been built up to like 160, 180 innings and they're physically mature guys that can handle workloads. So I think they're feeling pretty good about where that is. The outfield depth, obviously, we talked about. There's just some areas that they want to shore up, and they want to see if they can kind of flip some of these young controllable pieces that they have in excess for those young controllable pieces that would fit a little bit better on the roster.
Makes sense.
So probably they will not be looking for an arm for their rotation in during the, you know, the off season. So most probably they will be working around other holes in the roster, right?
Yeah, I think you know, we mentioned Bumgarner. Zach Davies. Zach Davies is a free agent. So I think that with Bumgarner's situation being so uncertain, you know, I would guess that they'll, you know, end up sticking with him through this off season, seeing how he looks into next year. And if it's bad, if it looks the way that it looked for a lot of August and September, maybe they got to go in a different direction if they're really going to try to compete. You can't keep kind of, you know, giving away games like that.
Yeah.
That, you know, that does kind of suddenly mean that you're going to be dipping even more into that pitching depth. So look, I think they would like to add a starter. But I think I asked Hazen this. I think he said it was a little bit more of a want than a need.
Okay.
Like
A nice
like
thing to have.
yeah, and I don't think that it's a thing they're going to be targeting and being super aggressive and giving up a big piece for. But if they can spend, $5 to $8 million on a guy for 1 year that, sort of like Davies was, right? A little like a bounce back guy that they feel good about that can give them some depth and some innings. I think they would probably consider that.
Right.
Okay, Nick, you mentioned earlier that one thing the Diamondbacks will probably be in the market for is a right-handed hitter. You talked about maybe a trade, giving away some of their outfield depth. Do you see any other additions to this offense?
Well, I think that if they were to trade one of those outfielders, I think the DH right now is an opportunity to get these guys at bats, right? To keep everybody active. I think that if they were to trade one of those outfielders, that would possibly change things a little bit and make it a little bit more likely that they go and add kind of a pure DH type of. I don't know, JD Martinez is a good name. I don't know if he fits in their budget, how that works, how that looks exactly. I think that they, whether it's a right-handed hitting outfield or right-handed hitting third baseman, I think that makes sense. I think another catcher is another position that they've talked about. I think that it's more of a complement Carson Kelly type of player that we're talking about here, rather than a just straight replace or upgrade over. They could certainly upgrade at shortstop, but the thing there is they've got a lot of interesting options coming, right? So I don't know that you want to make a huge commitment to someone at that position when Jordan Lawler is not that far away, and Blaze Alexander, who they just added to the 40, is even closer and is coming off a really encouraging season in Double-A. Yeah, those are probably the spots that make the most sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I saw one of your articles where you talked about Mike Hazen. He's from the Red Sox, right? And he was there when David Ortiz was their DH. So the idea that maybe he looks to have more of a player who just fits into that role. Man, JD Martinez, that seems like such a logical fit, a guy who can mash lefties and kind of just you plug him in every day at DH. That would be interesting and a veteran presence for this young team.
Yeah, I think that last part that you mentioned is something that they're very interested in, and have different people in the organization have talked about how they'd like to have that kind of veteran position player to kind of help. I think some of the down periods got a little extended, and maybe having a veteran that can kind of help guide guys through it would be a good thing.
Nick, you mentioned Lawler and Blaze Alexander being relatively close to the show here. How do you see the playing time situation sorting out at shortstop between Nick Ahmed and Perdomo next year? I mean, obviously, both of them probably appear to be more stopgap guys, although Perdomo did have a very interesting pedigree in the lower minors. How do you see that playing out?
That's a good question. I would guess that Ahmed, you could, and we have to assume that he's going to come back healthy and everything's going to be fine from his surgery. He had a shoulder procedure that was, I think, fairly significant. So I guess it's no sure thing that he will, but assuming he does, he had always been a guy that hit left-handed pitching pretty well. I mean, he wasn't a monster against them, but relative to how he did against righties, he hit them pretty well. He was a competitive at bat. I mean, he was good enough that a lot of times Torey Lovullo would lead Nick Ahmed off against left-handed pitching. So you would think that he would get most of the at-bats there. And I don't know. I mean, if he's rolling, I would think that they would just keep riding him even against right-handers. I don't think they want to completely forget about Perdomo. And so that'll be interesting, whether it's a situation where they think they can find enough at-bats for him and keep him involved and move him around, or if it's a situation where he ends up down in Reno continuing to develop. Perdomo had told me at the end of the season that he was really excited going into the winter because he was going to be hitting with Jose Ramirez and trying to learn some things about the way that he goes about his business and what kind of things he's looking for at the plate. I don't know how much those plans change. I know Ramirez had some kind of a hand surgery or some kind of a surgery. But yeah, Perdomo's a motivated guy. I don't think he's ever been the caliber of hitter of a lot of these other prospects that they have in the system, but he's always had an idea at the plate. And, there were stretches, the end of last year, at the end of 21, it looked like a really interesting offensive player who kind of was suddenly clued into the realization that he could do damage. And it never really felt like he got there again in 22. Like, he kind of just felt like he was feeling his way through at bats a lot of the time. Every now and then he'd put a really good swing on a ball, but couldn't do it consistently. So he's a hard one to say. His defense was very good, especially in the second half. So he's not a liability there. But I do think, starting with the fact that Ahmed's got that contract, he's a veteran, he's experienced, he's performed, he's been on winning teams before. He would be the guy that I would think would get the first crack at regular bats.
And speaking of playing time, did we already see the last at bats of Dalton Varsho as a catcher?
Yeah, it sounds like it. He even said that late in the year, I think in August, after Corbin Carroll got promoted, when it kind of started to be a little bit of a crowded outfield situation, and it seemed like it would make sense for Varsho to get a few starts here and there to open up the bats behind the plate. He kind of admitted that he had talked to the team about, I don't think I want to do this anymore. And I think he realized how good he was of a defender in the outfield until this year. He was a Gold Glove finalist, and you could make an argument he should have won a Gold Glove. And I think he also realized that catching is dangerous. His career can be a lot longer if he stays in the outfield.
Cool.
All right, so these next two players I'm going to ask about because they kind of I feel like they kind of fit in similar category. It's Ryan Nelson and Drake Jameson. So I want to get a sense from you. Do you feel that they are definitely going to start the season in the rotation? And what is the team's outlook for them this season?
I think they're going to have a chance to compete for rotation spots. I don't think either of them you would necessarily be able to bet on. Nelson, I think, looks like the more surefire starter long term. I don't know who would have the leg up coming into next year necessarily. I don't know that one of them should really. I think they both pitched really well late, and maybe whoever looks the best in spring training, I could see kind of. I don't think you really want to do too much spring training evaluating, but if a guy's stuff looks better than another guy's in spring, that there's something to that. I think Jameson still has some things to prove in terms of being a starter long term, in terms of kind of being able to have consistently sharp command. But the way his two-seamer moves, his slider has always been a weapon. He's a really good athlete, a really good competitor. I think he answered a lot of questions. I think he quieted a lot of doubters with the way that he pitched. I think it was 4 starts down the stretch. The way he pitched in those starts, I think, made a lot more people think that this guy can be an effective big league starter over the long term than maybe thought weeks earlier, right in August when he was putting up a 6 or 7 something ERA in Reno. Yeah, I think those guys. I think Brandon Pfaadt is going to come to camp with a chance to win a job. Probably a little bit behind those guys, so maybe we'll have to wait his turn a little bit if those guys are throwing well. But those are, Tommy Henry as well. I mentioned him earlier. I think those are the guys that are going to come in kind of vying for whatever spot or spots are open in the rotation.
I like Ryan Nelson a lot. I hope it's him because the guy is amazing. But as you say, it can be, a little tricky to find out just yet. So there are 3 guys that we've already talked about: Carroll, Lawler, and Drake Jameson. If you were to bet, who do you think has the biggest impact? Carroll, right?
On next year?
Or from a dynasty perspective, maybe.
Okay.
It would be a better question.
Carroll, Lawler, or who?
Or Jameson.
Yeah, you'd have to bet on Corbin Carroll. I don't know how you'd bet against him based on just the the track record of performance at this point. But look, I mean, Lawler might have a little bit more pure power. And I guess if you're talking about fantasy perspective, if it's a guy that's going to be able to stick at shortstop versus an outfielder, I don't think it's crazy to imagine a Lawler being the best of the bunch. It's also not crazy to imagine Drew Jones being even better than those guys, especially talking to some of the amateur guys that saw Drew's career in high school and on the amateur circuit. You can't really like make that bet right now, right? I mean, he's never played professionally. He's coming off an injury, a surgery. But yeah, I mean, Corbin Carroll has elite hand-eye, elite, swing decisions, really loud exit velocities. Just the ability to hit balls hard all the time, and has performed at the highest levels. And look what he did. He hit 260 with I don't have the numbers in front of me. I think he had a 330 on base and a 500 slug, if I'm remembering right, in those 5 weeks in the big leagues. He never got hot. Now, I mean, he wasn't playing every single day. They were making sure that he was going to be rookie eligible so he could, go for the award and go for the draft pick next year. But like, he had a 130 OPS plus or WRC plus, whatever you want to look at, something like that. And he never got hot. I mean, I think that's kind of crazy. Like, I think this is possibly a really special player.
All right, Nick. So we've got a couple of rapid fire questions for you. So just looking for some one-word answers to these. And Carlos, why'd you have to do this to me? Because the first player here, as a Yankee fan, it hurts me. It hurts me to think about, to say his name. But Luis Gonzalez.
Luis Gonzalez. I guess he's just. I guess I'll go with icon. Icon. Okay. Yeah.
Yankee
to you and to Arizona.
Me too. An icon for me too.
Favorite past or current Diamondbacks player?
Oh gosh, I have to go with one.
Yep.
I can't do that.
All right, give me three.
Okay, guys that I liked covering the most. I loved covering. I only got to cover him very briefly, but I really like covering Max Scherzer, who people probably forget was ever a Diamondback. Dan Herron and Miguel Montero.
Okay. Yeah, Dan Herron. He always seems like such a
interesting guy.
Interesting guy. Yeah, absolutely. One player who you think may surprise us this year?
Well, I mean, I don't know. Like, I feel like you can kind of pick anybody on this roster, and most people externally won't know a whole lot about him, right? Like, if I were to say Jake McCarthy, people that follow the game closely and know about him won't be all that surprised. So I feel like that's not really the answer you're looking for. I don't know. Maybe I guess like, if you look at what Brandon Pfaadt did last season in the minor leagues, I think he struck out more batters than anybody in the minors since the 2001 season. And I just don't think that I hear him talked about enough as like an elite pitching prospect. I know that he doesn't throw 99. He doesn't have like a one of those pitching ninja sliders, Yeah. But like, at some point, like, when you miss that many bats and you pitch that well at really hitter friendly environments, you're nasty. There's something you're doing that's nasty. So I mean, I guess that's a guy that, like, people don't know how to pronounce his name. People don't know who he is. He came out of a tiny college and the end of the pandemic draft. Like, I think he's probably a pretty good under the radar guy in a sense, even though, I mean, he's going to end up on like top 100 lists, but I don't think people realize quite how good he is.
Yeah. Last name is Fought, but silent P, right? His last name begins with the P. So
PF, yeah, two A's. DT.
Yeah, that's an odd spelling. Well, Nick, that was 178 words, but we'll allow it. Have you ever played fantasy baseball?
Oh yeah, I play fantasy baseball.
Nice.
That's
I
good
have
to
some,
know.
I have some of these guys on my roster. I like how you asked me about Jameson and Nelson and who has a better. I've got both of those guys on my keeper team. So
That's
Well,
awesome.
There you go. So if you got them on your keeper teams, that's a little hint. We should all be paying attention.
Nick, as we get close to wrapping up here, any fun or interesting story that you could share with us about your time covering the Diamondbacks? Something that was really kind of cool or funny?
oh gosh, I don't know, man. Uh, I feel like it's been all sad times lately. The way this franchise has been playing. No, I don't know. I mean, we have a lot of fun. Steve Gilbert with MLB.com and I are been on the beat for a long time together. We keep each other sane. We've had a good clubhouse, a good group of guys to cover for the last several years. So I feel like there's just kind of too many guys that we goof around with to single out any one story. But we keep ourselves laughing pretty often.
Who's the funniest player on the team right now?
Oh man. I don't know. I'm trying to run through the clubhouse. McCarthy is an entertaining guy.
Okay.
I was complimenting or not I was just commenting on the fact that he was like crushing do you remember those fruit by the foot? Like he had a package
yeah.
of fruit by the foot that he pulled out of the kitchen in Milwaukee the last weekend of the season, or last series of the season. I'm like, oh my gosh, I haven't had one of those in forever. He's like, hold on. He like went into the kitchen and grabbed me a fruit by the foot. And I'm like, I can't accept that. He's like, no, have it. So
Wow. Is that a perk of being a major league player? Because I don't see those anywhere. So
I guess they still exist. Yeah, who knew,
yeah,
right?
wow. Man, I had a lot of those during grade school. Man.
Yeah, Carson Kelly's a lot of fun. He's a funny guy. He's a good dude to cover. So they've got a good clubhouse. There's a lot of funny guys.
Nice. All right. Well, Nick, this has been super helpful, really informative. Thank you so much for being so generous with your time here. Just want to give you a moment to tell our listeners where they can find your work.
Yeah, go to Arizona Republic's website, azcentral.com. I usually tweet out all of my stories, and my Twitter is at Nick Piecoro. It's NickPiecoro. Thanks for having me on, you guys.
Thanks for being on with us. It was wonderful.
Yeah,
Thanks
thank
a
you
lot,
again, and we're going to take a quick break.
All right, guys, I got to run. Thank you.
Thanks, Nick, so much. Really great. Thank you.
Okay.
All right. Are you still recording, right?
I'm turning it off now, so you'll have to edit this out.